because he is the creator of a new course on sexual abuse and the church. And there he is. Hey, hello
How's
from
it
down
going?
under.
Hey, I have been so nervous that I would not have done the math right for this, and I'm glad I did
Right.
that.
I'm just so, David, I'm so glad you did the math and not me. Or it never would have worked out. Yeah. Great. I'm so glad that you could connect and that we could talk about this new course that is on Deep Wide Academy, and it's a collaboration. You've written this course, David, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit, just to introduce maybe some of my followers to you, to your story, and to your work, and then maybe just a little bit about like why we think this is kind of key right now. So, kick us off. Who are you, David? Tell us who you are.
Yeah, so I live in the Phoenix area. I'm a pastor, and I also do work. So I'm one of the co-founders of what's known as the Religious Trauma Network, and I also do different things. Like I spoke at a conference with the Maricopa County Public Health here to help train different faith leaders here on understanding religious trauma and walking with people towards healing. So, pastoring and then kind of sitting in that space. My story is I was born and raised in Colorado Springs, which is like, the mecca of evangelical world. And in the 80s and the 90s, you had focus on the family was hitting it big. But I was raised in fundamentalism, so kind of the shiny, happy people vein of fundamentalism, and with that, it was extremely abusive. But also in that, I experienced as a kid childhood sexual abuse, and I carried that for about 15 years and caused a lot of stuff in me that I didn't know. Now, in that environment wasn't a safe environment. It was a very toxic environment. I knew looking back on it now that internally I felt it wasn't safe enough. If I would have come forward, it would have been safe for me. And so I was 25 when I opened up, and I remember exactly when it happened. I just had coffee with my lead pastor of the church I was at in San Jose, California, and then another person. We were having coffee, and the individual we were having coffee with was sharing his story. And it's almost he was about 30 years older than me, and I saw myself in him. And we went back to the church offices, and I shared with my pastor for the first time, "Hey, I was sexually abused as a child," and he gave me time off, and then I went into counseling, and in that, there was a wrestle with my faith, like, there was some deconstruction and stuff happening there, and I realized that outside of just being cognitive wrestle with my faith, trauma had caused me to, when I'm in, uh, Christian environments, to, like, question all the things, and in that, when I disclosed it, through about 2 years of counseling, I finally filed a police report, and then I sent letters to every elder of the church that I was raised in and watched them handle and mishandle that whole situation. There was a sense of like, finally, I have a voice, I can speak, but also there was moments of re-traumatization in that. As well as my pastor, he did the best he could to be supportive, but some of his advice, like he was mad that I filed a police report because that's not how the church should handle things, he said. And so, yeah, carrying that, I found myself a couple years later on staff at a mega church here in the Phoenix area. And while I was on staff, there was a story about one of the pastors that came out. It was reshaped even to the point where he looked like the hero in it. And that was kind of the beginning of the end of that season for me. And I was a musician. I was a worship leader. And so a lot of the work that I did was focused around music, but oftentimes when I'd wind up on podcasts or speaking at conferences, I'd share my story and a lot of people would lean in and be like, "Hey, could we talk about the abuse portion of your story? Like, how did you handle that? What was done?" And I noticed that there were a lot of gaps within church leadership where they don't know how to handle this. And uh, through a period of multiple podcasts and conversations I had, including a friend of mine who's an author who brought me on, I just over the last probably 2 years have kind of found the space of like, I need to be speaking into this. I need to be pushing. I need to be training. And last fall, I mean, there was a series of things that happened, the stuff with Orange, some other stuff in my life also had happened. But one of my close friends that I've been friends with since I was 17 years old, his wife came forward that she had been abused, sexually abused by her pastor at age 26. And I knew that there was something there. I used to work for this pastor and I worked for his kids. They're professional musicians and we were kind of in this world together. I knew something had happened, but it had been spun as an affair or an inappropriate relationship. And so even though that it was public, but it was shaped, she finally came forward. There was a Julie Royce report that came out and said, "No, this was adult clergy sexual abuse." This was this past fall. And I watched as many people in those systems stayed silent for fear of this particular known pastor. And so I finally spoke out. I spoke out, I made it public on social media. And the pushback I got, I mean, I had their kids come in and threatening me. I mean, it was insane. And the people that were siding with him as if he was the victim for her disclosing the abuse, I just was like, man, we need some education here. We need to understand this stuff better. And so I started looking for a resource that could be simple to help churches, help pastors. And I started looking, and I found next to nothing. I found one, but it was so limited, and the whole goal was that you would buy supplemental pieces to the material. And so I just decided that night I like outlined what one could look like and started writing it. And so that was in November of 2024, and I finished it in January of 2025. And pretty much I sat on it. It was like a 40-page manual that I hadn't really told too many people about until you reached out to me one day and were like, "Do you have a resource for clergy sexual abuse?" So that's kind of where we're at now. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we have in some ways similar journeys, and the couple things that you said that I think are really important and probably landed in the same place where I ended up doing like a podcast on all the things about clergy sexual abuse I can't stand, which again, just interviewing everybody I could and getting all the information I could after, naively thinking to myself that the church would just tell the truth because why wouldn't the church be a safe place for victims? Why wouldn't the church be? And then just this, terrible education around like, oh, they don't either know what they're doing. So like, I think there is a lot of ignorance. There's a lot of rehearsed and practiced techniques that are about protecting the church instead of protecting victims. So I think there's a catch up that needs to be done on church leadership, even on like, what is abuse and like, what do we deal with it and all that kind of stuff. And then I felt like there's also just these like knee jerk reactions people have. And I think part of it has to do with people haven't done the work in their own life. So, like you
Mhm.
said, like all that abuse happened to you when you were a child, and there was no safe place to say so. I mean, even that,
Yep.
I think that's probably happening en masse. I think there's tons of people who've had abuse happen to them and they've had no safe places, especially, it turns out that toxic churches are the opposite place. Like that is not a safe place.
Yeah.
So finding safe places, you're like 2 years into your healing journey before you even know, wait a minute, this should be told, like I should speak about this and actually I
Yeah.
should file a report to stop it. Cause I think that's the other piece is that almost every victim I've ever met, especially adult victims, like clergy sexual abuse adult victims, they know going into any disclosure that there's really no win in this for them. It's only going to be pain and suffering. I mean, I've never spoken to a clergy sexual abuse survivor who's like, oh, yeah, then I'm going to have my great shining day of victory. Everyone's like preparing themselves to be destroyed again.
Right.
And I often say to them, like, what are you doing? Why would you do, like, what do? You don't have to do this, And they're like, we've got to stop it.
Mhm.
Like the thought of it happening to another person, the thought of it happening without me having done something to say, make it stop. I can't live with that. And that's part of their own healing journey is to say, we're not going to keep perpetuate the problem. So
Yeah.
it's quite a beautiful spot we come to. I feel like just even the fact that victims are and survivors are finding the strength and the courage when it's a thing they're supposed to do. Not every survivor should do this, but when it is the thing they're supposed to do, that are saying we have got to hold some account so that we don't keep perpetuating a system that keeps harming people.
Yeah.
And I felt like this from, the my beginning stories of abuse in the church. I felt like this is such a beautiful opportunity for the church. Like right from the
Yeah.
beginning, and this might be telling you how naive I am in some ways, I guess, but I really believe that this is God helping the church be the church. I think this is a purifying agent. I think this is
Mhm.
a truth telling exercise. I think this is an invitation to the church to be the church. And I think we have to learn how to do this because we don't have the tools. We either don't have the information, which, like you and I said, we're interested in this and we found it hard without going deep. I could take a really deep trauma course or I could read several books.
Yeah.
But to actually just get entry level, this is just what it is. Here's some definitions. Here's how it works. Here are the patterns of predatory behavior. Here are the ways in which you can disrupt the system. Here's how create
Yeah.
solidarity with the victim. Like here, so I feel like this might be the best opportunity for the church to learn the tools for the revelation of who Jesus is. Like, I actually think it's like evangelism, it's like discipleship, it's like basic, the way of Jesus behavior. And I'm so thankful that you made this course. So tell me a little bit more about like how, because I feel like if I had have had this course, I would have taken it. Like I would have taken
Yeah.
this right away. And if I was a pastor of a church, I would say every leader in our church needs to take this course. I would even, when you said the backlash that you faced when you stood with the victim and spoke out against a predator, and then the system and the people in the system, backlashed against you
Mhm.
because they're terrified, because they're ignorant, because they don't understand these dynamics. I would say everybody in every church, it would be so helpful for everybody to have like a 101 on
Yeah.
this is what we're talking about when we're talking about sexual abuse in the church. And
Yeah.
because I feel like there are people who are not willfully mean, but they are confused and they have been malformed in what this is. They've been, whether or not it's been with direct language or not, but they've been groomed. Whole, congregations have been groomed to believe certain things. So I would say that every, Christian, every church could really benefit from this. So just tell me a little bit more about David, about how this course works.
Yeah, I think it's important that we understand some of the psychological, I guess you could say, directions that take place in our minds and our systems uh, when it's disclosed, and they're pretty typical things like protecting image, and what are some of the tactics in that. When leaders are called out on behavior, there's certain things with like cognitive dissonance in them and within the congregation, and so my goal was to help people understand some of these things, like how is there a role reversal, kind of like what I've told you, where we call it Darvo, where all of a sudden the victim becomes the oppressor and the abuser becomes the victim of, and it's very common. So my goal in this particular course, again, I didn't go super deep, but deep enough to kind of have a basic understanding of why does role reversal work, why and Darvo, and how does that play out, and how could we respond to that? What are some things to watch for? One of my things in that is I would love to see churches, because of what we call cognitive dissonance, when new information that challenges the image you had of your leader comes your way, you have to like try and reconcile new information that you don't like. And typically people throw it out and they side with the leader that they love. And oh no, he didn't do any harm. If we begin to learn and understand that that is a dynamic as pastors, we could actually shepherd people through those moments better when it happens in their church. The other piece in that, there are some common, I didn't get into all of them, but there are some common responses, such as questioning the validity of the abuse when there's delayed disclosure. So for me, it was 15 years. They say the average for childhood sexual abuse is 23.9 years. They say that Normally, the average age for survivors of adult clergy sexual abuse is between like 50 and 55, and there's a lot of reasons to that. But there is delayed disclosure oftentimes because of like me, I didn't feel safe, and you're questioning all these things. And with adult clergy sexual abuse, there's a piece in there where you're targeted because of your faith, your loyalty, your love for Jesus, the church, and the mission. And so, if we learn and kind of understand that there are things happening in somebody's healing journey that sometimes causes delay, then it'll help us when we respond out of a trauma informed lens to not question the validity of those moments. So there's just a couple pieces of those. How do we understand the typical responses by leaders, by congregants with cognitive dissonance and Darvo? And then how do we understand some basic things around trauma and responding in that? Again, they're really simple, but I see us missing the mark time after time after time as a church, and even churches that try to do the best they can, oftentimes miss the trauma informed lens, like what's happening in the person that I also have to pay attention to.
Yeah.
I'm really focused on. I just wrote actually an article for Surge Network, which is a network here for church planning and strengthening here in the Phoenix area. And I focus kind of towards the same direction in there is comparing and contrasting the good shepherd versus the hired hand. And what does a good shepherd do? He lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand, when trouble comes, he flees. He looks out only for himself. And we have a lot of leaders and systems that will, in a sense, sacrifice the victim to look out for themselves. We have more hired hands and people functioning in the way of Jesus. So that's what I hope to see the tide change, and I hope that that people have those conversations and learn and continue it. So yeah,
Yeah, David, I feel like even as you're speaking, like some of those early things that I didn't know. I mean, I probably knew enough because I was a justice advocate and had walked with people who'd suffer from sexual exploitation for years. So I kind of had, I knew what predators look like. I knew what sexual predators look like. I knew what grooming looks like. I know what pimping is, like, so there was so many different, like, I was like, oh, wow, I know exactly what this is, but this is not normally, how it plays out. So I was able to draw those parallels that this is deeply wrong and the church is against it. This is against the ways of Jesus. Like this pastor is literally a predator in disguise. Like I could
yeah,
sort all that out. But that response, that Darvo stuff, that reverse victor offender concept, which once you see it and understand it, you see it now everywhere. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
you just see how knee jerk it is too, so and sometimes this will look like a confession, many times where a pastor will
mhm,
confess, his deepest, darkest secret, except that it's not really a confession. It's like it's a pretend confession to get people to feel sorry for him, and he's a sinner like all of us are sinners. And, it's just a
yeah. Work
classic
the
predator
sympathy. Yeah,
behavior. Right. But if you don't know it, you just like, oh, look, he's like humble and he's like wants to own his mistake. You're missing so much of the dynamic because you just don't know.
yeah,
And so I'm so thankful because once you start to see it, it really does bring a lot of light and a lot of discernment. And one of the things I really believe that this course could be a helpful move forward for churches that do want to be safe, that are not hired hands, that are shepherds, and that feel like they want to participate with the Holy Spirit as the Holy Spirit reveals and exposes and invites us to be a better and safe place for people. So I do think that's God's intention in all this. You and I both, we haven't spent our whole lives, helping to serve the church just to tear it down. That's not my
yeah,
hope. My hope is that the church really would rise to be who she's supposed to be. So that's one thing. And then the second thing is I think it really could offer some discernment and some wisdom for people. So they're not just going into places that are unsafe. I think once you start to see the dynamics and how they work, you start to see that at play. And then you can go, oh, wait a minute. There are like 15 red flags in this church.
Yeah.
that I need to pay attention to. And I maybe don't want to bring my kids here. Like, I don't want to
Yeah.
stay in this. And I think that's actually a real thing. Like, people need to start discerning and leaving places that are unsafe and unwilling to
Yep.
participate with Jesus in his ways. And I think we're in that sort of a place. Like, I probably would have like stepped around that way more carefully a few years ago, but now I'm just like, get out of there. Get out
Yeah.
of these places that refuse to say, whoa, there's something going on that we need to pay attention to. And we're willing to learn and change and grow. Like, if that's not even the posture, so again, if you're like at a church and you're like, I agree with this and I'm going to start this with my small group. This course would be great to do that with the leadership team, with the pastor. If you wanted to reach out on the course, you could even reach out and say like, hey, we would like a guided version of this, or like, can we connect with David to do something specifically for our church? Just feel free to start looking at the material. Right now, the intro is free so that you can get a taste of the material, and kind of play around. Like, what would this be like? Do it with your small group, your home group, whatever. Uh, and then maybe even suggest it, as a resource for your pastor. And that might even be a good indication. Like, somebody's like, you shouldn't be doing that. That's terrible stuff. Or like, are you trying to burn down the church? That's probably a good discerning tactic. Get
Yeah.
out of there. If a church isn't even open, to learning. So anyway, I think I'm very thankful. I think this is, how long is this course, David? How long do you think it takes someone to go through it?
I think you could do it in a week if you spent 30 to 30 minutes to hour tops. So a day. It would maybe be a month and a half, 2 months if you met with a small group once a week. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And then there's supplemental readings in there. There's recommendations if you want to go deeper. But this is meant, and it is actually even deeper than I think. It's hard not to go deep in this space, but it's probably
Yeah.
even deeper than, it's not just like a super overview. It is taking you through some specifics around abuse and abuse dynamics and in the church and responses and things like that. But it is enough of an overview that you could do it. It's not outlandish, and it is designed to give you that entry level. And this is, again, when I connected with David, this is something that I've been wanting to try to put together for a couple of years, and haven't had the bandwidth in some ways because I've just been like responding, and like, oh, there's so much things that need to be done in this space. Um, and so there's lots of stuff at Deep and Wide Academy. We're working on a whole space. So there is a trauma informed course that's available by invitation. Like, you have to book it in person, and it's with Hagar's Voice team. And then David, this course is just a wonderful addition and kickoff really for this whole thing. I really believe with all my heart that this is a season where God's inviting us to learn and to grow and to do better for a generation. And I think you and I both, deeply committed, both of us survivors ourselves of childhood sexual abuse, both of us advocates, kind of by accident in a way, both of us sensing the invitation to say like, hey, we can do better and we can help people with what we've learned from and suffered through. And I feel like this is God, even bringing us together to say, this is about good work. And I feel like for a time, we need to keep telling the truth. We need to keep calling out toxic behaviors. We need to keep making it difficult to normalize what is terrible practice and ungodly, ways, even demonic sort of agendas. I'm not going to stop telling the truth and standing with victims who are light bearers in the season. But I feel like that's a work of like the tearing down of demonic strongholds of like abuse behaviors and things like that. And this is a building up of godly people who want to learn and grow. And this is an invitation for the church to build its muscle in terms of truth telling and responding to survivors and solidarity with the ways of Jesus and walking in good discipleship practices. So I feel like though that work, Mary said, this is the work, right? He's going to tear down and he's going to build up. And I'm so excited that we're offering this as a build up option. Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm loving this opportunity, so I appreciate it. I look forward to hearing stories too, and
Yeah.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah, reach out to us, folks, as you're using this material or you're diving in, and let people know and let us know. If you see any spelling mistakes, please, or any other invitations for us to grow and change, and we can do that. We can keep adding to that material, but it's super entry level, guys. It's a very affordable price, by the way, too. And that price is literally just to keep the wheels working at Deep and Wide Academy. And uh, David, you'll put a link. Do you want to put a link into this?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, so that people can go directly there. Or if you go to David's bio, the link is right there. Or
Yeah,
if you just go to deepwideacademy.com, it's right there. It's a featured course. Sexual abuse and the church is the name of the church, is the name of the course. Deepwideacademy.com. That's where you can find it. And David will put his link there for you.
awesome.
And we're excited. We really hope this is of help, guys. Help us spread the word. Pass it around. It's time. It's probably past time. And I'm excited to see what it might do. How many people it might help, and find a new way forward together. In truth. So thank you, David, for all your work, and excited to see where this goes.
Me too. Thank you for the opportunity.
All right. Bless you, friend.
All
See ya. Or good day, mate.